She stood before the throne, draped in nothing but defiance, her violet skin glowing with soft pulses of rebellion. The royal seamstress trembled, clutching the untouched silks meant for her coronation. "No," the alien girl said, pointing to the human janitor kneeling nearby. "I'll wear what he wears." And as the queen leaned forward, catching sight of the stained apron knotted like a hero's cape across his shoulders, her lips curved into something no one in the court had seen in years. She smiled. "Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this fill your heart just a little fuller, don't forget to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story will make you believe in impossible kindness all over again." The throne room of Lumeris Prime was woven from crystal and silence, lit by skylights that refracted 1,000 shades of blue across the polished floor. Banners stitched from solar silk swayed gently above, each thread encoded with the history of the royal line: wars won, treaties forged, ancestors crowned beneath stars that no longer burned. Today, another story was meant to be added. The court waited in hushed anticipation, nobles and ministers arranged in a half-moon of ceremonial stillness. At the center stood a child, small, violet-skinned, hair like woven pearl, the heir. She did not move. Royal seamstresses stood to the side, holding out the robes, violet and silver, cascading with embroidered suns. But the girl stared not at the robes. She stared toward the far edge of the chamber, where a side corridor led off into quieter, dimmer spaces. Spaces not meant for royalty. "No," she said. The seamstresses blinked. One stammered, "Princess, the robes are your birthright." "I don't want them," the girl answered, voice steady. "I want the apron." Gasps rippled through the court. Murmurs rose like steam from boiling glass. The queen, seated high upon the throne of light, did not speak. Her lavender gaze narrowed, but her lips did not part. She watched. A minister stepped forward, trembling slightly beneath the pressure of royal scrutiny. "Your Grace," he said, bowing to the queen. "Surely the child does not understand the symbolism." "The apron is his," the girl interrupted. "He ties it like a cape. It makes him strong." "Who?" asked the queen, though her voice was soft as a drifting petal. The child turned and pointed. The doors at the back of the chamber were still open, just barely, and through the sliver of light stood a man in a faded grey uniform, sleeves rolled to the elbow, an old apron cinched at his waist, stained with years of solvents, soap, and star polish. He had one knee on the ground, a mop resting beside him. Elias Ward, custodian of Lumeris Prime. And behind his leg, peeking out shyly, was a girl with a messy braid and curious eyes, his daughter. The alien child's voice carried across the floor like a melody only children still knew how to sing. "He saves the floors. He saves people too, I think." A few chuckles escaped from the more skeptical nobles. Others looked to the queen for dismissal, but the queen's eyes were fixed not on the child, nor the court, but on Elias. He hadn't noticed the attention. He was busy wiping a stubborn smear from the obsidian tiles, his shoulders moving with the slow rhythm of someone who found comfort in repetition. The girl in the center turned back to the seamstresses. "No robes. I'll wear what he wears." The court froze. A silence heavy with disbelief settled like dust, and high on her throne, the queen, ruler of systems, keeper of oaths, tilted her head just slightly. Her lips twitched, almost imperceptibly, as if remembering a thread long forgotten. Long before sunrise lit the towers of Lumeris Prime, Elias Ward arrived through the eastern staff gate, dragging his mop bucket like it was a half-asleep child. The guards barely looked at him anymore, just a nod, a scan, a buzz of clearance. He preferred it that way. Visibility meant questions, questions meant stories, and stories, in a place like this, could turn dangerous real fast. He wasn't supposed to be here this long. His contract was meant to rotate him off-world after a standard lunar cycle, but something in the plumbing broke during his first week, and he stayed to fix it. Then the tiles started cracking in the lower atrium. Then the Queen's steward discovered Elias had a way with stains, how he could lift burns from crystalline marble like they'd never happened. "Hands like inheritance," the steward had said, not unkindly. That was 3 years ago. Now he was part of the stonework. Always in early, always out late. A whisper of footsteps when the court still dreamed. His daughter, Mara, had her own rhythm. She learned to rise when he did, to dress in layers that could survive marble chill and steam vents. She liked to help, though help mostly meant getting into things. The court called her the mop shadow when they thought he couldn't hear. He didn't mind. There were worse things than being known by your daughter's orbit. "Papa," Mara whispered, pulling her sleeves over her hands as they entered the great hall. "Why do we clean where no one walks?" He glanced at the stretch of floor ahead, miles of polished obsidian, untouched, unstepped. "Because someone might," he said. She nodded, as if that answered more than it asked. By the time the sunlight filtered through the ceiling prisms, casting kaleidoscopic rainbows across the thrones, Ilias had already cleared 3 halls. He worked in meditative silence, mop head gliding like a painter's brush. Cleaning was more than wiping away dirt. It was about restoring shape, inviting light to settle where it belonged. Sometimes, late at night, when Mara was asleep in the supply closet he'd rigged into a bunk, he would stare at the floor and swear he could see stories in the water ghosts of royal debates, old peace treaties, first steps of crowned heirs. That morning, he was halfway through tracing an arc of dried boot wax when he heard it. A voice too melodic to be courtly, too clear to be disinterested. "She follows you," it said. Ilias turned. The alien princess stood there, barefoot on cold tile, arms folded beneath her thin ceremonial tunic. Her violet skin shimmered faintly in the new light. "She follows you," she repeated, "and smiles." The courtiers don't smile when they follow. Ilias looked down at Mara, who was now pretending to scrub with a floor brush twice her size. "She's just a kid," he said quietly. "I am too," the alien girl said. Then she looked at Mara again. "But she has a better cape." Ilias blinked. "It's not a cape. It's just my apron." She tilted her head. "You tie it like it is." And with that, she turned and left, leaving only soft footprints in the shine behind her. The service halls of Lumeris Prime were nothing like the throne rooms above. Down here, the walls pulsed with warm pipe steam and soft utility lights. There were no stained glass windows or woven banners, only schedules pinned to corkboards and metal lockers lined with forgotten name tags. This was where the air smelled like cleaning solution and tea bags, where voices echoed, not in judgment, but in laughter and tired relief. Ilias liked it better here. It was honest. That afternoon, when the corridors quieted after the morning bustle, he sat on an overturned crate, sipping broth from a recycled food pouch. Mara was nearby, sprawled on a pile of folded linens, sketching stars on the concrete floor with a piece of broken chalk. "She says the spiral's wrong," Mara muttered. "Who?" Ilias asked, glancing over. "The princess," said Mara, frowning. "She watched me draw the star map, then said I got the arc wrong. But I didn't. I checked twice." Ilias raised an eyebrow. "The princess came down here again." Mara shrugged. "Third time this week. She doesn't talk much at first, just watches." Before Ilias could respond, the sound of soft, barefoot steps reached them. A moment later, the princess emerged from behind a row of laundry bins, her ceremonial sash trailing like a comet tail behind her. She wore it loosely, as if it were a costume she hadn't agreed to wear. Her eyes flicked to the chalk drawings on the floor, then to Ilias. She fixed the star map. Mara mumbled. "I only adjusted it," said the princess. "Humans draw in flat lines. Stars don't think that way." Ilias offered her a pouch of broth. She stared at it, confused, then took it like it might explode. "You can sit, you know," Mara said, patting the linens beside her. "You're not made of glass." The alien girl hesitated, then knelt carefully. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. Ilias resumed sipping, watching the two girls out of the corner of his eye. "Why do you wear that?" the princess asked, nodding toward Elias's apron. He looked down at it, faded blue canvas, stained at the hem, pockets sagging with rags and tools. "Habit, I guess," he said. "You work. You wear something that holds what you need." "It looks like a cape," she said softly. Mara grinned. "I told him that once. So now he ties it behind him sometimes when I feel scared." "Why?" Because heroes wear capes, Mara said simply. Even when they're scrubbing floors. The alien girl was quiet. Then she stood, tugged lightly at the edge of the apron's tie. Will you show me how to wear it like that? Elias blinked, uncertain. You want an apron? No, she said. I want his cape. And though her voice was quiet, it echoed down the hallway like a vow whispered to the stars. Elias had tied his apron behind his back only once before that moment, on a day when Mara had scraped her knee and refused to cry. Be brave like Mama, she'd said. Elias, choking on his own breath, had laughed through the pain and looped the apron strings behind his shoulders, flaring them out like a cape. Then I'll be brave like you, he'd told her, and she'd finally smiled. Since then, the apron had been more than cloth. It had become armor, a symbol, a private magic that made the hard days gentler. Now, he watched the alien girl study him as though that same magic could be borrowed. The next morning, she returned. This time, she brought no attendants, no royal guards. She entered the service corridor like it was a place she had always belonged, her bare feet careful on the cool tile, the ceremonial jewels still tangled in her hair from an abandoned diplomatic breakfast. In her hands, she held a folded towel. I tried making my own, she said, holding it out. Elias took it. It was a napkin, embroidered with a crest she'd clearly torn from a banquet cloth. She'd looped holes in the corners with what looked like braided wire and knotted string. It wasn't an apron, but it was hers. May I? She asked. He hesitated. He shouldn't. He was just the janitor. Touching the air, dressing her, this was grounds for dismissal at best, punishment at worst. But then he saw Mara in the corner, giving a thumbs up with both hands and grinning like mischief was oxygen. Elias nodded and crouched behind the princess. He tied the cloth gently, tugging the knots with practiced care. When he was done, he stepped back. There, he said, a proper hero's cape. She spun slowly, letting the napkin flutter behind her. It feels different, she said. It feels like yours, Elias replied. She looked down at Mara's chalkstar map, now corrected with looping arcs and constellations neither of them could name. Do you think heroes can be small? She asked, suddenly serious. All the best ones are, Elias said. It's the only way they fit between the cracks. The princess was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to the mop. Elias had leaned against the wall and picked it up by the handle. I want to help, she said. You don't have to, Elias said gently. I know, that's why I want to. And so she helped. Badly at first. She left streaks, sloshed water. Mara laughed so hard she snorted, but the girl didn't flinch. She smiled through it, focused, determined. It wasn't play. It wasn't rebellion. It was practice. Elias watched her carefully, in the way she stood, the way she listened, the way she tied that ridiculous cape with pride. She didn't look like an heir avoiding duty. She looked like a child preparing for a different kind of throne, one earned not by blood, but by the shine you leave behind. The day of the coronation fitting arrived with blinding ceremony. Gold banners unfurled from the highest spires of Lumeris Prime. The air shimmered with harmonics designed to calm nerves and enhance regal bearing. Courtiers flitted like jeweled insects, each more elaborately dressed than the last. In the royal fitting chamber, a room of mirrored walls and sunlight manipulated by prism arrays, the seamstresses prepared the ceremonial robes. Spun from starlight thread and gravity woven, the fabric floated in midair like a breath caught in time. But the alien princess did not enter like royalty. She stomped in with bare feet, a towel tied like a cape fluttering behind her. The lead seamstress blinked as if struck. My lady, your robes are ready. They are sacred. No, thank you, the girl said calmly, brushing past them toward the platform. The Queen's Chamberlain, a tall being with skin like folded parchment, cleared his throat. You will be draped in the royal lineage shroud. It has been worn for 12 generations. I'm the 13th, the girl interrupted, hopping onto the dais and spinning, cape flaring. I choose different, the Chamberlain stiffened. This is no costume parade, Your Highness. The robes are ceremonial. They carry history. She looked down at her apron cape and smoothed a corner lovingly. So does this. One of the younger seamstresses stepped forward hesitantly. But the queen approved the shroud. I'll wear the crown, the girl said, but not the robes. Gasps leapt from every corner. Silence poured in like cold water. The chamberlain opened his mouth to argue when the doors at the far end of the room creaked open. The queen entered without fanfare. No trumpets, no procession. Just her presence, which quieted the air like gravity itself, had noticed her arrival. She surveyed the chamber, her gaze sweeping over the levitating robes, the trembling attendants, the still hovering crown. Then she looked at her daughter, and her daughter, heir to an empire, stood proudly in a faded towel and kitchen twine. Explain, the queen said softly. The girl walked forward, chin high. I've seen what robes can hide. I want something that shows. The queen's expression remained unreadable. I want to wear something like his, the girl said. Elias, the janitor. The name hung in the air like static. You will not be cleaning the palace during your coronation, the chamberlain hissed. No, the girl said, but I will wear what someone brave wears, someone kind, someone who fixes things. The queen stepped closer. You reject tradition. I redirect it, the girl said. The queen studied her. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she looked down at the tied apron corners, the worn hem. I see. A single nod. Not approval. Not disapproval. Recognition. And when the queen turned to leave, her cloak caught the edge of a cleaning rag that had been left beneath a dressing bench. She didn't scold. She didn't flinch. She bent to pick it up and folded it neatly in her hands. By mid-afternoon, the court was ablaze with whispers. From the spiral gardens to the echo bridges, everyone who held a title had heard the same impossible rumor. The heir refused the royal robes. And not just refused, but insisted on donning a janitor's apron in their place. In the upper terraces, ministers whispered behind folding fans. In the scholars' dome, archivists trawled old law scrolls, trying to find if any precedent existed for a coronation in non-regal attire. Spoiler: none did. Meanwhile, Elias pushed his mop across the solstice hall, the largest atrium in Lumeris Prime, where the floor reflected the sky like a mirror. His motions were steady, circular. Water sloshed quietly in his bucket. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His name was already being said in chambers he'd never been invited to. A steward approached him tentatively. Elias Ward. He paused, wrung out the mop, and nodded. That's me. Oh, you're being summoned. Elias blinked. By who? The Queen. The mop stopped mid-stroke. The Queen's private observatory was quiet. Unlike the throne room, it was simple, no gold, no gemstones, just glass and air. The stars stretched endless and soft beyond the domed ceiling. The Queen stood with her back to him, watching the horizon bleed into dusk. Elias waited at the threshold, cap in hand, uniform damp at the cuffs. You clean quietly, she said. I try not to disturb, he replied. She turned, and for a moment, the galaxy shimmered behind her in the glass. Yet, somehow, you have disturbed everything. Elias shifted his weight. I didn't mean to. She walked slowly toward him. My daughter insists on wearing your apron. She calls it her cape. She says you showed her how to wear it like a hero. I didn't mean that either, he muttered. You've made her stubborn. She was already that, Elias said, and the corner of her mouth twitched before she smoothed it back into control. The Queen stepped closer. Tell me, Elias Ward, what is it about that apron? He looked down, thought for a moment. It catches the worst of the day, he said, and still gets up the next morning. It's what you wear when you fix the things no one wants to admit are broken. The Queen studied him, gaze like frost and flame in one. My daughter does not like robes, she said at last. But she trusts cloth that has survived cleaning fire and paint spills. Elias scratched the back of his neck. I didn't ask for any of this. And yet it's been asked of you, she replied. There was a pause, deep and wide. You may continue to clean, she said, turning back to the stars. But know this. You're no longer invisible. Elias bowed his head and left the observatory. Outside, as he passed the marble pillars of the upper court, he noticed something strange. A trail of wet footprints, bare, small, and familiar, pressed into the polished floor beside his, and they were headed in his direction. He found her near the Sunwell fountain, seated cross-legged on the marble, tracing spirals in the dust with one finger. The alien girl looked up as Elias approached, her violet skin glowing faintly in the evening light. The towel cape was still tied around her shoulders, though it now sagged a little to one side. "You left before I could ask," she said. "Ask what?" "Why the marble sings." Elias blinked. "It sings?" The girl nodded, dragging her finger along the seam between two tiles. "Not like music, like stories that hum." Elias sat down beside her, joints stiff from the day. He ran his palm along the stone. It was warm, even after sunset, polished smooth over centuries, yet each block bore its own whisper of memory. There was truth to what she said, though few would have believed it. The marble of Lumeris Prime had been quarried from the silent mountain stone, known to hold impressions, echoes, energy. Every stain that had touched it, every sound spoken near it, left something behind. If you knew how to listen, it remembers, Elias said quietly. What? The floor. It remembers everything we try to forget. She looked at him then, not like a child, but like someone old enough to carry wonder without apology. Even me, especially you. She leaned back on her palms, eyes turned skyward through the glass ceiling, where the twin moons of Lumeris began their nightly dance. "When they made my crown, they told me it would help me carry history," she said. "But it never felt real, not like this floor does." Elias smiled faintly. "Crowns are for telling people who you are. Floors show them." She was silent for a while. "Did your daughter cry when your wife died?" the princess asked, suddenly and without warning. Elias didn't flinch. She was too young to remember. "But sometimes, I think her heart remembers, even if her mind doesn't." The girl nodded. "That's how I feel about my father. He died before I was born. But sometimes when I walk through the council hall, I feel something warm, like I'm supposed to stand a certain way or speak softer near the eastern wall." "He probably stood there once," Elias said. "Said something that mattered. Floors remember things like that." The princess looked down at the seams between her bare toes. "Can you teach me?" she asked. "To clean like you do, to listen." Elias chuckled. "It's not glamorous. I don't care. It's slow. I don't mind. It's quiet." She smiled. "So are stars, but they still light things." And in that moment, Elias saw something shift in her shoulders. Not the weight of a crown she'd yet to wear, but the willingness to bear it differently. Not from above, but from beneath, like someone who would someday clean her own throne before sitting in it. He stood, held out a hand. She took it. The marble beneath them didn't shine any brighter, but somehow it felt like it might. The following night, the palace had quieted early. The ballrooms were dark, the council halls sealed, and only the low hum of distant gravity engines echoed through the lower wings. It was the perfect hour for Staines to speak. Elias knew this. It was when most of the galaxy's eyes turned inward or closed completely that the real work could begin. He stood in the western corridor, a place few nobles ever walked, kneeling beside a blotch of old tar embedded near the wall. It had resisted solvents, heat, and hours of elbow grease. He had grown to respect it. Not all things were meant to be erased easily. The alien princess sat beside him, apron wrapped around her like armor, her palms already smudged with polish. Her ceremonial jewels had been left behind. Instead, a smudge of cleanser streaked her cheek like war paint. "What caused this one?" she asked, pointing to the stain. Elias studied it. "A technician spilled sealant here during the solar flare drills last year. Nobody told command. They were scared of being reassigned." "Why didn't you report it?" "I did, I just didn't use words." The girl frowned. "What does that mean?" Elias reached into his bucket and drew out a rag. Carefully, slowly, he dipped it in water, twisted it tight, then began wiping the edge of the stain, not to remove it, but to highlight its shape. "It looks like a comet," she whispered. He nodded. "Most people see a mess, but if you pay attention, stains tell you what happened. Sometimes, even why." She bent closer. "So you don't clean to hide things. You clean to reveal them." "Exactly." They worked in silence for a while. Every few minutes, Elias would gesture for her to shift her grip, adjust her wrist, or move with the grain of the stone. She obeyed without question, soaking up the knowledge not like a student memorizing for a test, but like someone building muscle memory, like someone preparing to carry it forward. "What happens to a floor that no one cleans?" she asked after a while. "It forgets," he said simply. "Truth fades under grime. Then it gets rewritten by the people with louder shoes." She stopped scrubbing. "And what happens to a throne? No one questions." He met her gaze. "Same thing." She didn't say anything to that. She didn't need to. Later, as they packed up the supplies, she reached into her apron and pulled out a tiny object wrapped in cloth. Unfolding it, she revealed a tarnished pin, small, shaped like a spiral galaxy, dulled with age. "This was my father's," she said. "He wore it inside his uniform, so it wouldn't catch light." Elias took it gently, studying the worn metal. He must have known the value of quiet things. She nodded. "I want to be like that." Elias handed it back. "Then listen to the stains. They'll teach you more than speeches ever will." The girl tucked the pin into her apron pocket like a sacred oath, and for the first time, the corridor felt cleaner before a single drop of polish hit the floor. It was just after dawn when Mara found the alien princess crouched in the laundry alcove, rummaging through discarded linens like she was on a sacred mission. Sunlight filtered through the grated skylight, dust dancing in the beams like scattered stardust. The palace still slept, but the service wings buzzed with early murmurs, tea carts rolling, water pipes warming, boots echoing faintly. The princess barely looked up as Mara entered, arms full of aprons, not robes, not capes, just ordinary work aprons, creased, stained, lived in. "What are you doing?" Mara asked, yawning. "I'm trying to pick one that feels right," the princess muttered. "Yours has that triangle fold. Your father's has the frayed hem. This one smells like mint tea." Mara blinked. "You've been sniffing aprons? Only the ones with character?" Mara grinned. "You're weird." The princess didn't argue. "When I wear the ceremonial robes, everyone stares. But when I wear this," she lifted a smudged apron embroidered with an old maintenance sigil, "I feel like I belong." Mara sat beside her, tucking her braid behind one ear. "You don't need to find the perfect one." "Why not?" "Because you have to make it perfect. Papa says the cape's not magic until you tie it like it means something." The princess tilted her head. "Show me." So Mara did. With quiet care, she helped fold the apron into a shape that draped just right over the shoulders. She cinched it behind the neck, then looped the strings around the princess's waist and tied them in a snug, double-knot bow. "Too tight?" she asked. "No," the princess said. "It feels secure." Mara stepped back, nodding in approval. "Now strike a pose." The princess raised her chin, one hand on her hip, the other resting at her side like a Hollywood hero waiting to leap into battle. "That's the look," Mara said, giggling. For a moment, the two girls stood still in the laundry room, bathed in amber light, surrounded by forgotten fabric and echoes of things grown old through use. It wasn't a throne room, but it felt just as important. "You're not afraid, are you?" Mara asked. The princess paused. "I used to be." "Of what?" "Failing, looking small, wearing something that made people laugh." Mara tilted her head. "They laughed at my papa too, when he polished the obsidian court with a toothbrush. Said he was wasting time. But that floor's the only one that ever reflects true." The princess looked down at her apron, smoothed the folds, straightened the corners. "I don't care if they laugh," she said finally. "I want to walk in something that feels like me." "That's the trick," Mara said. "They only laugh when they haven't seen it done right yet." And as the morning bell rang across Lumeris Prime, calling the palace into its waking day, two girls walked out of the laundry hall side by side, one heir to a crown, one daughter of a janitor, each wearing aprons tied like capes, stepping into the light like it belonged to them. The queen sat alone in her contemplation chamber, surrounded by the slow rhythm of the planet's breath, cool winds sliding across the crystal walls, light bending through memory glass into gentle rivers of color. The palace outside bustled with preparation. Today was the procession. Today her daughter would be formally introduced as heir, the crown placed upon her brow before the court and the stars. And yet, The queen remained seated, watching a dust mote drift between beams of refracted dawn. She'd worn the ceremonial robes once, decades ago. They had weighed like silence. Beauty made heavy by expectation. A soft chime at the chamber doors pulled her from memory. The chamberlain entered and bowed, his expression expertly composed, though the tightness in his jaw betrayed his unease. "Your Majesty," he began, "there has been no change." The queen raised a brow. "She remains adamant," he clarified. "She will wear the apron." The queen didn't speak. "And she requests," he added after a moment's hesitation, "that her hair remain unbraided, and that the scepter be replaced with a mop handle, symbolically." Still, the queen said nothing. "She calls it her inheritance," he said, nearly whispering. At last, the queen stood, slowly, gracefully, as if her bones understood the weight of ceremony, even if her spirit no longer bowed to it. "And who tied the apron for her?" The chamberlain blinked. "We believe, the janitor's daughter, Majesty." The queen nodded once. "Good." The Hall of Continuum was a corridor of light and time, where ancient laws shimmered along translucent walls, and the air was always crisp, as if brushed daily by unseen caretakers. Nobles lined the gallery, their garb as elaborate as the politics they whispered. They turned as one when the procession began, expecting silks, expecting jewels, expecting tradition. What they saw instead made several mouths fall open. The heir to the throne walked barefoot across the marble, her violet skin radiant beneath the lightfall. A simple apron creased, patched, and proudly tied, draped over her royal tunic. Its pockets bulged not with gems, but with a cleaning cloth, a chalk stub, and a tarnished pin shaped like a spiral galaxy. Gasps rippled like wind across tall grass. Behind her, a young human girl walked as if the aisle was a playground path, head high, steps steady. No one dared stop them. At the dais, the queen waited, robes untouched, crown gleaming like an old promise. Her gaze met her daughter's. The heir stopped 3 paces from the dais and bowed not with flourish, but with intent. The queen stepped forward. She did not scold. She did not correct. She gently lifted the crown and placed it upon her daughter's head. The apron remained. The queen's voice rang out, clear as crystal struck once by fate. "Let it be known that our legacy is not stitched by silks, but carried in the hands that shape tomorrow." And for the first time in a generation, the court saw her smile. The echo of the queen's words still lingered in the vaulted chamber as the crowd struggled to recalibrate their sense of reality. There had been no trumpets, no hymn of lineage, no ceremonial veil passed from ancestor to heir. Just a girl in an apron standing beneath the sunlit dome of history, a mop handle in one hand, and a crown balanced on her brow like it had always been hers. In the first row, a Virellan noble blinked twice, his 3 eyelids fluttering in disbelief. "Is this performance art?" he whispered to his seatmate. "No," replied a minister from the Coral House, voice oddly reverent. "It's precedent." The procession continued. The heir walked down the steps of the dais slowly, flanked not by generals or scholars, but by Mara, her Cape sister, as she now called her, and 2 custodians, both stunned, but unable to refuse the queen's silent nod. No one dared protest, not when the queen had smiled. In that moment, the apron wasn't just cloth. It was a statement, a shift, a new axis upon which the future would spin. A handful of delegates clutched pearl tablets, frantically rewriting speeches they had prepared for the formal reception. Others simply stood in stunned silence, unsure whether clapping would be a gesture of honor or heresy. The queen descended behind them, regal in her bearing but unadorned by excess. She walked slowly, deliberately, as if giving the marble a chance to memorize the shape of this moment. Near the back of the gallery, Elias watched from behind a half-draped curtain. He hadn't planned to attend, had planned, in fact, to spend the whole event polishing the statues in the north wing so he wouldn't have to witness the spectacle of his daughter's friend turned lightning rod. But Mara had insisted. She'd looked at him that morning, hands on her hips in her apron turned ball gown, and said, "You're not allowed to mop this memory away." So he stood there now, hidden from the spotlight but not from the meaning. The alien princess turned briefly as she passed the reflecting pool at the chamber's heart. Her eyes found Elias across the marble. No words. Just a moment of locked gaze and a small, quiet nod. Not for show, for truth. As they reached the outer corridor, sunlight pouring through the atrium, a hush fell over the court again. The Queen raised her hand for final words. "Let every child of this realm know," she said, her voice echoing off glass and gold, "that courage is not born in tapestries or scrolls. It is stitched daily into aprons and chalk lines, and the choice to see dignity where others see duty." The crowd, as if finally exhaling, began to applaud, not thunderously, not performatively, but sincerely. One clap, then another, until it became a rhythm, a cadence of awakening. And as the heir stepped into the light, her cape flared behind her, not like rebellion, but like royalty, redefined. In the aftermath of the procession, Lumerus Prime did not erupt. It shifted, not in a spectacle of protest or celebration, but in something subtler, deeper, like stone warming after centuries of cold. The kind of change that doesn't shout, but rewrites the shape of silence. In the great halls, servants walked a little taller. Ministers paused a little longer before speaking. And everywhere the heir passed, her apron cape swayed like a banner no war had ever flown. The Queen returned to her private chamber that evening without guards or advisors. She dismissed them with a glance, walked past the ceremonial scepter without touching it, and sat beside the star-panel window. The day had carved a new groove into her reign, and she felt it in the quiet ache of her ribs, like a breath held too long had finally been released. Protocol by law should have demanded immediate reviews, reprimands, even reprimand of herself. But the Queen only smiled, because something had happened she had not foreseen. Not during all her years of training, not even in the pages of history encoded into the robes she once wore. Her daughter had stepped into power, not by demanding it, but by understanding its shape could change. Not lessen, but shift. A soft knock broke the silence. "Enter," the Queen said. Elias Ward stepped in. His uniform was freshly laundered, though the mop bristles in his back pocket looked exactly the same. He removed his cap, but did not bow. He only stood, shoulders squared in the posture of someone who had always done the hard work behind the curtain. "I didn't think you'd call for me," he said gently. The Queen gestured to the seat across from her. "You have mopped more than marble this week." He chuckled under his breath. "If I've caused too much trouble." "No," she interrupted. "You've reminded us what trouble looks like when it cleans up after itself." He smiled faintly, unsure if it was a compliment. The Queen leaned forward. "There's a law, 1,000 years old. It says only those of noble descent may advise the throne directly. It was designed to protect lineage, but I believe it has outlived its usefulness." Elias tilted his head. "You want to change the law. I want to rewrite its intent," she said. "What is nobility, if not devotion to the well-being of others?" He looked down at his hands, calloused, lined with cleanser scars. "What would you have me do?" "Keep doing what you do," she said, "but now when you speak, others will listen." He swallowed. "I'm not a speaker," she nodded. "Good. Speakers are easy to find. Listeners are rare." From the courtyard, the sound of children's laughter rose. Mara and the princess were out there somewhere, chasing chalk stars under a molten sky. The Queen looked toward the window again. "Let the court draft whatever new protocols they need," she said softly. And then, more to herself than to him, she added, "Just make sure they include room for capes that tie at the waist." They both smiled, quiet, honest, and the protocol began to change. The throne room was empty again, just as Elias liked it best, quiet, undisturbed, the early morning light stretching across the floor in soft gold ribbons. No diplomats pacing, no robes sweeping, no whispers of succession or statecraft, just the sound of water sloshing gently in a mop bucket and the soft slap of bristles meeting stone. He worked slowly, the way he always did, not from laziness, but from reverence. Every streak, every scuff mark, every footprint had a story, and to erase it carelessly was to forget too quickly. Today, his mop moved across a long streak of dried sap, left behind by a diplomat's ceremonial staff that had toppled in a moment of distraction the day before. It made no headlines, caused no scandal, But the floor remembered, and now it was time to help it let go. Behind him, soft footsteps padded in from the corridor. "I brought you something," the voice said. Elias turned. The princess, no. The heir stood there, still barefoot, though now she wore a tunic of deep blue trimmed with threads the color of sunrise. Around her waist, the same apron cape was tied, freshly washed but stained with memories. She held out a folded square of cloth. "What's this?" he asked, taking it carefully. "It's a new rag," she said. "I made it from one of the old sashes I hated." He smiled. "Repurposing royalty. I like it. It soaks better than I thought it would," she added proudly. They stood together in silence, the golden light now climbing the walls like it had business there. Mara would be arriving soon, late as always, full of breakfast crumbs and brilliant schemes. The court would follow, less crusty than before, a little more curious. "Do you think the galaxy is actually changing?" the heir asked. Elias looked at her. "I think it already did. The question is whether anyone's paying attention." She nodded. Then quietly, "They're letting me speak at the next council about servant equity and hallway access and floor time. Floor time. I want them to walk the halls themselves, not float over them or send assistants. Just walk. Feel what it means to be where others work." He nodded. "You're starting from the foundation." She grinned. "Where else would I start?" The queen entered moments later, alone as usual. She said nothing, at first just looked at the mop, the air, the cloth in Elias's hand. Then she reached behind her and, to their astonishment, untied her own ceremonial sash. She stepped forward, knelt briefly, not in submission but in symmetry, and began wiping a scuff mark with the edge of her robe. No fanfare, no speech, just cloth on stone. The galaxy would not collapse from kindness, nor would it explode from truth. It would shift like water, finding its level until the high places and the low ones finally learned to recognize each other in reflection. When Elias left the room that day, he didn't hang the mop right away. He placed the heir's cloth beside the bucket, folded square, stained just enough to matter, and somewhere behind him, the throne gleamed just a little brighter.